You ever think you finally earned some peace, only to watch it get snatched away in the dumbest, most unbelievable way possible? 5 years ago, I built my dream home out on 9 acres of Colorado hillside, surveyed, stamped, notarized. Perfect, right? Just me, the pines, a stubborn old mutt, and the wind. I'd been through enough in my life to think maybe, just maybe, I'd finally found a place where nothing and nobody could bother me anymore. So, imagine my face when the HOA president comes marching right up onto my porch, clipboard in hand. Sunglasses bigger than her personality, tells me, with a straight face, my house is sitting on their land. At first, I laughed. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. But then the survey team found something worse. Turns out, her entire $1 million mansion, pool, patio, guest house, and all was actually built on my property. And when it was all said and done, the court let me take it all back. Let me tell you, I thought retiring from federal land inspection was supposed to be the end of hard years. Apparently, the universe had other ideas. 20 years. I dealt with bureaucrats who couldn't read a plat map if it was stapled to their face. Shady developers who played dumb when the money was good. Surveyors who lost boundary lines whenever it was convenient. That'll wear a man down. So, when I finally hung up my badge, I swore I'd spend whatever time I had left in a place where the only lines I cared about were the ones drawn by the mountains and the wind. That place turned out to be Dean acres of rugged Colorado hillside just outside Grand Junction. Used to be logging land. Way back in the 70s. The kind of ground that feels old under your boots. Like every pine tree's got 100 stories to tell. And most of them end with winter. I didn't buy it on a whim. Believe me. No. I did what a federal inspector does best. I tore that property apart on paper long before I ever set foot on it. Every corner pin. Every turn. Every little boundary shift marked. Dated. Notarized. Elevation profiles. Soil records. Old surveys going back 40 years. I even ran a cross-check through 2 different agencies. Just to be sure. When I say I made sure that deed was clean, I mean you could have eaten your Sunday dinner off it. So, when I finally signed the papers, it felt like a weight I'd been carrying for decades just dropped away. Good relief. The kind that loosens up your shoulders. Then I built the house I'd been sketching on bar napkins since '98, 2 stories. Pine beams. A wraparound porch big enough for 3 rocking chairs and an old dog's bed. A workshop underneath. A terrace where you could watch the storms roll in from Utah like slow gray trains. Best part, no neighbors. No rules. No committees. No meetings. Just the silence of the hills and the whistle of the wind. Most mornings, I'd sit out on that porch with my first cup of coffee, listening to the world wake up. Sometimes a hawk would skim across the valley. Sometimes a coyote'd trot along the ridge like he owned the place. My only job was to appreciate it. And for a while, that was all I needed, a quiet house on solid land. Enough space between me and the nearest property line to forget what it felt like to argue with anyone. And, to be honest, I really thought that was how the rest of my life would go. But trouble. It's got a sixth sense for showing up the minute you let your guard down. In my case, trouble rolled up in a platinum-colored SUV, wearing sunglasses big enough to double as riot shields, clutching a clipboard like it was a weapon. I didn't know it then, but the peace I thought I'd earned was about to turn into the biggest land fight of my entire career. And let me tell you, it wasn't going to happen in some courtroom, not at first. It was going to start right at the edge of my porch, with a woman who'd soon become the most dangerous HOA president I'd ever met. I first met Karen Hasslinger the way you meet a sudden gust of wind on a warm day, surprising, intrusive, and carrying a chill that just doesn't belong. Early summer. Soft sunlight across the ridge. Air so still you could hear the squirrels bickering half a mile off. I was tightening a hinge on my workshop door when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel, slow, deliberate, like someone rehearsing their entrance. I look up, and there she is. SUV polished, so bright it looked allergic to dirt. Out she steps. Dog in one arm. Sunglasses hiding half her face. One of those outfits that says, "I don't get my hands dirty." She doesn't wave. Doesn't smile. Doesn't even look at the house. Just flicks through a folder in her hand. Glances up at me. Then right back down. Good morning, she says. Voice so sweet it sets your teeth on edge. I'm Karen Hasslinger, president of the Blue Haven Ridge Homeowners Association. I just sipped my coffee. Kept it friendly. I'm not part of your HOA, I said. Her smile didn't budge. Oh, I'm aware. But sometimes, community standards extend beyond formal membership. We're all neighbors here. That, I figured, was the end of it. Some people need to feel important, you know? But then she turns, reaches into her SUV, and pulls out a gold-embossed envelope, holds it out with 2 fingers, like she's giving me an award. Sets it right on the corner of my porch rail. A small note about your garage door, she says. That was the first letter, and the beginning of everything that came after. That evening, I opened it at my kitchen table. The letter was typed, formatted, watermarked, looked like a wedding invitation. The message was short and sharp. Your garage door color does not align with the visual harmony standards of the Blue Haven Ridge community. Please repaint within 14 days. I read it twice, then laughed so hard I nearly spilled my drink. I lived 300 feet outside their boundary. My land was older than their development. My deed didn't mention a single thing about visual harmony. I sure as hell didn't sign anything that said Karen and her clipboard got to approve my paint color. Into the fireplace it went. But older folks say, 1 letter is a mistake, 2 is a pattern, 3 is a problem. A week later, another envelope this time, slipped under the workshop door. Fence height exceeds community uniformity guidelines. Uniformity? For a community I didn't belong to. Into the fire. Then came the third. Your tool shed is visible from certain rear-facing windows of nearby community residences. Please conceal or relocate. Into the fire. Then the fourth, something about my gravel driveway being aesthetically disruptive during sunrise hours. Into the fire. But each letter got longer, more formal, and somewhere in the complaints about my porch lights and the slope of my land. Her tone changed. She stopped writing like a neighbor with concerns and started writing like someone preparing a file. You can smell trouble coming, especially if you've spent 20 years dealing with folks who bend the truth till it screams. Karen wasn't just annoyed. She was building something, a story, a narrative, a case. And every one of those ridiculous letters was a brick in the foundation of the war she was getting ready to start. The kind of war that doesn't begin with shouting, but with paperwork that smells like perfume and bad intentions. By the time the fourth letter burned to ash, I figured Karen had finally run out of creative ways to complain about things that weren't her business. Turns out, she was just warming up. The real turning point came on a sharp October morning. One of those Colorado days when the air tastes like cold metal and the sky is just too blue to be real. I was in my workshop, turning a piece of juniper on the lathe, when I heard tires crunch over my gravel drive. Not the slow roll of a Naborno. This was the stiff, official kind. Someone brought paperwork. I wiped the sawdust from my hands, stepped outside, and there she was, Karen, standing at the bottom of my steps. Navy blue pantsuit. Never been outdoors. And beside her, a young guy in a suit that didn't quite fit, clutching a cheap leather briefcase like it was about to explode. Thomas Edgington? The kid asked. I nodded. He opens the briefcase, hands shaking just a bit, and pulls out a slim folder. You've, been served. He holds it out the way you'd offer meat to a hungry lion. Karen's face? She wasn't smiling. She looked satisfied, like she'd waited a long time for this. I took the folder. What is this? Formal notice, she says. From the Blue Haven Ridge Homeowners Association. I raised an eyebrow. I'm not in your HOA. Legally irrelevant, she replies. And that was the moment I knew. Karen wasn't confused. She wasn't petty, she was strategic. I opened the folder right there on the porch. First page looked official, bold headings. Legal language. Signatures. Violation summary. Whatever that meant. But the second page, well, that's where the stupidity really took flight. A map. Not a survey. Not a plat. Not even a document with a real coordinate on a screenshot of Google Earth. Covered in red lines like a child's crayon drawing. Beside it, a typed statement. Property known as the Edgington Residence encroaches 24 feet into the Blue Haven Ridge Association's legally designated lands. Encroaches. Like my house, just up and walked off the foundation one night. I looked up at Karen, then at the map, then back at her. You're accusing me of building my home on your land? On community land, she corrected. And we're giving you an opportunity to resolve this amicably. Amicably, I repeated, deadpan. And how do you suggest I do that? She hands me another sheet highlighted like a middle school textbook. It demanded I cease unauthorized occupation, restore the encroached land to community conditions, and submit a proposal for a voluntary transfer of improvements. Improvements meant my garage, part of my workshop roof, and a six-figure chunk of my foundation. I just stared at her. You think I built my house on someone else's land? Her expression was pure arrogance. Oh, not someone else, the community's. And you did your due diligence before accusing me of theft. We conducted a thorough internal review. She hands me a color printout of the same mangled map. Visual estimation based on updated boundary interpretations. I laughed, honest and loud. Echoed right off the ridge. Karen, you've got 20 seconds to get off my property before I call the sheriff. The kid in the cheap suit stepped back. 2 feet. Karen didn't flinch. We'll be following up shortly, she said. You just did? I replied. Now walk. And she walked, but not before turning to the road, raising her voice just enough for the neighbor's Ring camera to pick it up. You'll regret making this difficult. Didn't know it then, but those 7 smug words were the spark that would light the fuse on the biggest land fight of my entire life. It wasn't about a complaint anymore, or a misunderstanding, or an HOA president with too much time. It was about a woman who believed she could redraw the world with a marker, a map, and a lie. And she was about to learn that some lines, especially property lines, that move just because you want them to. After Karen left my porch with her thin smile and that silly packet of papers, I stood there a good long while. I'd seen a lot of bad maps in my time, but this was something else. This was incompetence wearing the mask of authority, and that's the most dangerous kind. I set the papers on my workbench, poured a fresh cup of coffee, and opened the top drawer of an old metal file cabinet. Inside, the documents that brought me more comfort than any Bible ever could me: original land surveys. Surveyors call them the bones of the earth. I call them the truth. But when someone hands you a fake map, even a laughably bad one, it triggers an instinctive tension behind your ribs. A little whisper that says, check, verify, confirm. And I did. Right after lunch, I grabbed my old Trimble GPS, a tool the government bought before they started getting cheap, and headed out toward the southern boundary. Not because I doubted my own surveys, but because I doubted Karen's intentions. Air was cold, crisp, clean enough to taste. Pine needles underfoot snapped softly as I walked. I followed the ridgeline down to the first boundary marker, the one set back in 2020 when I finalized the deal. And right away, the GPS chirp had nothing dramatic, just a small beep. If you've used those things enough, you know the difference between a normal drift and a reading that pulls you somewhere it shouldn't. I slowed, adjusted my stance, let the machine settle. Beep, 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 each one a little louder. That's not right, I muttered. The reading was off by 5, maybe 6 feet. Not much, but enough to make the hairs on my neck stand up. Markers don't drift. Coordinates don't wander. Boundaries aren't polite suggestions. They're recorded in the county like the 10 Commandments. I crouched, brushed away pine needles, and there it was, a faint, circular impression in the soil. Soft, freshly filled, not yet compacted by weather or time. Someone had pulled the boundary pin and put it back in the wrong spot. For a long moment, I just stared, because you don't accidentally move a boundary pin. You don't just dig one up like you're pulling a weed. Boundary pins are hammered into the ground like nails into the spine of the earth. They're meant to stay. But I didn't stop there. I walked farther along the slope, GPS guiding me. Every 30 or 40 feet, the thing would chirp again, each time more urgent, like a dog trying to get its owner's attention. Then I found the second hole. Then the third, each one a small scar in the soil where a marker once stood. each one a few feet off from its rightful spot. That's when the realization settled in. His wasn't carelessness or incompetence. This was tampering. Someone, probably at Karen's direction, had walked the boundary, lifted the pins, reset them to create the illusion her land went farther than it did. And they hadn't just moved one marker, they'd shifted multiple turning points. A novice wouldn't know to do that. Someone gave them instructions. I stood on that slope, cold wind coming down off the ridge, and I felt something I hadn't felt since my federal days. That old fire. The one that burns when someone tries to cheat a system you spent your life defending. Karen hadn't just crossed a line, she tried to erase it. I took photos of every disturbed spot, logged coordinates, marked positions. By sunset, I had enough irregularities recorded to know one thing for sure: the letter she served me wasn't the opening move. It was the first time she got caught. If she thought a bad map or a moved pin could scare me off, she was about to find out just how stubborn a retired land inspector can be. 2 days after I found those disturbed markers, the real professionals showed up. Sunrise, 2 white trucks with Rocky Vista Geomatics logos on the doors. If you've ever seen surveyors get out of a truck, you know the look, no nonsense. Heavy boots, coffee in hand, eyes already scanning the land before they hit the ground. These weren't clipboard warriors like Karen. These were people who listened to the land, who could read a hillside like a doctor reads an x-ray. Levi, the crew chief, solid and square-shouldered, shook my hand the way old colleagues do. Firm, simple, respectful. Got your files? Got your notes? We'll take it from here. That right there is a thing of beauty, a real expert who doesn't need drama. Just give him the land and the truth. They unloaded their garteropods, GPS receivers, reflector poles, a drone case with a LiDAR unit worth more than my truck, spread out like a small military op, everyone knowing their job. No wasted movements. I gave them space. Surveyors don't like shadows on their backs. From the upper terrace, I watched them move from marker to marker, checking depths, reading pins, measuring offsets, logging coordinates, those ceremonial gestures only surveyors seem to have. For 3 hours. Just peace, just data, just truth whispering up from the earth. Then, near noon, I heard a knock at the workshop door. Levi, mind coming with me? He asked. We walked down the slope together, pine needles crunching. He stopped at one boundary point near Karen's yard, a weathered, aged pin, right where the county said it should be, confirmed by GPS within 1 inch. He said, "So far, so good." I asked. He gave me a look. Not exactly. We walked another 20 feet. Levi knelt, pulled back ivy over a low rock wall, and there, half buried, was another boundary pin. Shiny. New. Wrong. Whoever placed this one, he said, was off by about 30 feet. 30 feet. That's not a mistake. That's a strategy. He tapped his tablet. My original boundaries in blue. Their new data overlaid in red. Here's where it gets interesting, he said. I looked, and my stomach dropped. Karen's entire backyard, her expanded patio, her guest house, the edge of her infinity pool, all of it rested on nearly 8/10 of an acre of my land. Not a few inches. Not a rounding error, almost a full acre. Levi, you're telling me she's built close to $1 million worth of improvements on land she doesn't own? Yep. That's exactly what I'm telling you. And the shifted markers? 5 of them moved. All in a straight pattern. All in her favor. That doesn't happen by accident. I stared at the overlapping lines again. She knew. Or someone working for her knew. Either way, intent's written all over that hillside. Levi slid his tablet back into its case. I'll have the certified report on your desk tomorrow. Signed, sealed, and ready for county review. Appreciate it, I said. He looked at me long and steady. Tom, this is one of the clearest cases of boundary fraud I've seen in years. You're not just dealing with a bad neighbor. You're dealing with someone who thinks she can redraw the world to suit herself. I nodded. I was afraid of that. But truth be told, some old part of me felt something else. To a spark, a steadiness, a familiar sense of purpose. Because now, the land wasn't whispering anymore. It was speaking loud and clear, and I was going to answer. I didn't sleep much the night after Levi showed me that shifted pin, hidden under the ivy like a bad secret. When you've spent years untangling land fraud, certain things settle deep in your bones. There's no such thing as a small mistake when it comes to property lines. That night, the feeling was unmistakable. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a slip of the tape measure or some newbie surveyor who'd missed a decimal. This was a scheme. And schemes, well, they always leave footprints. I just didn't expect the first footprint to show up in my inbox at 6 o'clock the next morning. Message came from Greg Porter. I recognized the name, one of the original homeowners in Blue Haven Ridge. We'd only exchanged a couple polite nods over the years. He always struck me as steady, the kind of guy who knew the value of minding his own business. His email was simple. Tom, I think you should see this. Keep my name out of it. Attached below, a video. I opened it. Turned up the volume. Security camera footage. Grainy. Blue-gray. Timestamp from about 3 months ago. You could see 2 men in landscaping uniforms, moving slow along the edge of Karen's yard. They weren't planting anything or trimming hedges. One was carrying a long metal bar, the other a bucket of dirt and what looked a lot like survey stakes. The audio was faint, but when the taller one pointed toward the slope, his words came through clear. She said, "Move it a little farther. No one checks these anyway." I didn't need better lighting. Didn't need faces. I had the method, the motive, and now, a taste of the means. Karen hadn't tripped over a mistake. She'd orchestrated a dawn operation to move the markers right where she needed them. And in her arrogance, she'd forgotten there are 2 kinds of neighbors in this world, the ones who mind their own business, and the ones who record everything. But the morning wasn't done with surprises. About 8 o'clock, I heard footsteps crunching on the gravel path. Out steps a kid 16, maybe 17, awkward as a new fool holding a drone controller. "Sir, are you Mr. Edgington?" I nodded. He swallowed. Nervously. Think I have something you should see." His name was Ben. Lived a couple houses down from Karen. Quiet kid. Hoodie too big for him. Sneakers that looked like they'd survived a few summers too many. He handed me a thumb drive like it was a live grenade. "I fly my drone a lot," he said, looking away. "For school projects. For fun. Sometimes just to take pictures of storms coming over the ridge. Wasn't spying or anything. I swear." "It's all right. Son, what did you find?" He plugged his controller into my laptop, and the screen filled with a stitched-together time-lapse citizens of flights. Months of footage. What I saw made my jaw tighten. Karen's pool didn't just appear overnight. It crept. Slowly. Deliberately, first a concrete pad, then a frame, then a deck, then another patio expansion. But the real kicker? Every few months, the whole structure would edge a little closer to my property, like a glacier made of concrete and bad intentions. At one point in the footage, you could see a new retaining wall pop up. Then a month later, another shift, then a flower bed, conveniently covering what must have been a turning point marker. I exhaled slowly. "Ben, this is incredible. Thank you." He hesitated, then said, "People in the HOA kept saying you were the problem, but it just didn't look right." None of it did. I put a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing." When he left, I stood there in the sunlight with that thumb drive in my palm. Between Greg's video, Ben's time-lapse, and Levi's hard data, the truth wasn't just under the surface anymore. It was mapped, measured, recorded from every angle. Karen hadn't just twisted the relish, tried to twist the land itself. And as the ridge caught fire in the morning sun, I felt something shift inside me. The fight wasn't theoretical anymore. It was real, and it was time to push back. By mid-morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Not out of pride, not out of anger, just something older, something simpler. A boundary's a promise, and a broken promise needs fixing. First step, file an encroachment dispute with the county. That meant submitting Levi's certified survey, photos of the disturbed markers, my original deed, the whole mess. The clerk on the phone recognized my name. "Oh, it's you," she said, with a pause. "Is this about Karen again?" Another pause. "Never mind. What do you need?" Second step, Draft a cease and desist. 2 copies. One for Karen. One for the HOA itself. Both clear as a Colorado morning. Any continued use or occupation of the disputed land would be treated as willful trespass, under penalty of law. 3rd step. File a preliminary claim of adverse occupation. Legal talk 4. If you don't contest this with real paperwork in 30 days, it enters the record as fact. HOAs hate deadlines more than they hate unapproved Christmas lights. 4th step. Upload everything to cloud storage. Multiple backups. Multiple devices. 20 years of federal work will make you treat every scrap of evidence like gold. Because, believe me, it is. Last step? Something I hadn't planned, but felt just right. I logged into my old Facebook account mainly used for sunsets and tomato pictures and typed out a single sentence. If you're going to accuse someone of building on your land, make sure your house isn't built on theirs. No names. No details. Didn't need them. Around here, folks can read between the lines, especially when the lines are made of property. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Then it kept buzzing. 20 minutes in, it was vibrating across my workbench. In half an hour, the post had hundreds of likes, dozens of comments, and a few shares from people I'd never even met. Truth has a way of traveling fast when you let it walk on its own. Messages started rolling in. Someone from the HOA messaged me privately. I knew she was hiding something. Please keep going. A guy asked, "Is this about the pool we all told her not to build?" One woman just wrote, "Oh boy, this is going to be good." Then someone sent me a screenshot thread from the private HOA message board. Karen was losing her mind. Paragraphs of polished panic. Disregard the misinformation. Boundary clarifications are internal matters. Unauthorized statements regarding HOA jurisdiction will be handled legally. Community unity is essential during this challenging time. Community unity. You'd think she was running for president. But fear makes people reckless. And Karen made her most reckless move yet. 2 days later, Sunday afternoon, not a cloud in the sky. I was out back tightening the shed hinge when I heard laughter drifting over the ridge. Not normal laughter, crowd laughter. I stepped onto the terrace and looked down toward the boundary line. And my jaw clenched. Folding chairs. Lanterns. A Bluetooth speaker. A folding table covered in wine coolers and salads that looked like they'd never seen dirt. 3 HOA board members in pastel polos. And right in the center of it all, Karen's son, hat big enough to shade a judge. Glass of Chardonnay in hand. They were having a barbecue. On my land. My disputed land. My active legal case land. She'd invited the whole neighborhood. Parents. Kids. Folks I'd never met. Sipping wine and chatting like it was an open house. It was theater's show of force. Look at us. She was saying without saying it. We belong here. He doesn't. I didn't shout. Didn't stomp down there. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is let people show the world exactly who they are. I walked back inside, grabbed my phone, and called the sheriff. Sheriff's line. Deputy Mills. Afternoon. I'd like to report an unauthorized group gathering on private land. Currently under active encroachment dispute. There was a pause. Is this about Blue Haven Ridge? Yep. We'll send a unit. I thanked her and hung up. What I didn't expect was the live stream of the residents was broadcasting the whole barbecue on Facebook. The title? HOA versus Land Guy, Grill Edition. By the time the sheriff's SUVs rolled up, the live stream had over 1,000 viewers. Comments were flying. Team Tom. Team HOA. You name it. 2 deputies approached Karen. And you could see her bristling on camera. We are holding a community event on HOA-managed property, she declared, loud enough for every phone to pick up. The deputy held up a tablet. County map, glowing. No, ma'am. According to the recorded boundaries, this is not HOA property. Someone gasped. Another muttered. I told her. Karen's face twitched. We have documentation. Ma'am, until this is resolved, this land is under legal review. Please step back across the boundary. She waved her hand. Sun hat wobbling. Everyone stay where you are. This is false information. The deputy, calm as Colorado granite, said, I'm going to ask again. When she still didn't move, the other deputy stepped in, and together they gently, but firmly, guided her up the hill across the real line. It got quiet. The kind of quiet that fills a room right before a storm. Then the live stream chat exploded. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, but I felt something shift, not in me. In them. The neighbors. The community. A foundation cracks long before a house falls. And this was her first real crack. Folks packed up chairs and plastic cups. Someone muttered. Told her this was a bad idea. A woman shook her head. Embarrassed. Herding her kids away. Karen stood there alone. Face red. Shoulders trembling. And snapped at someone off camera. This isn't over. Not even close. And she was right. It wasn't over. But now, she'd just turned the whole county, the internet, and half her own neighborhood into witnesses. She'd proved my case for Maliv. On camera. With a sun hat and a grill. What Karen didn't realize was, from here on out, the battle wouldn't be fought on a barbecue lawn. It would be in a courtroom, and I already had the truth in my corner. The day of the hearing. Autumn wind rolling down from the booklifts. The courthouse was packed. Neighbors. Reporters. Zoning interns. Folks who just wanted to see a fight. I walked in steady. Not angry. Just ready. Across the aisle. Karen made her entrance the way she lived, loud, without making a sound. White blazer. Lips pursed so tight you could have used her as a clamp. Her lawyer looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The judge, Beatrice Lewin, looked like she'd weathered 30 years of nonsense and wasn't having any of it. She read the summary, the filings, then nodded at Karen's attorney to begin. He was all politeness, polish, and finger-pointing. Blamed the developer. Mapping errors. Clerical inconsistencies. Said Karen had acted in good faith. And implied I'd escalated things unnecessarily. Then he sat down, looking like he'd delivered the Gettysburg Address. When my turn came, I didn't give a speech. I just handed the judge my original survey. The new GPS survey from Levi. The geospatial overlays. Drone footage. Photos. County records. Emails. HOA archive logs showing Karen had checked out the official survey months before. Every document clean. Stamped. Notarized. The judge went through them slowly. Like a jeweler inspecting diamonds. She paused at Levi's overlay, blue and red lines right on top of each other. Karen's pool. Patio. Guest house, 8/10 of an acre. All on my land. Then the voicemail, Karen's own voice. Sharp and irritated, just keep pressure on him. He'll fold. That land's not worth much. He's just being difficult. You could hear a pin drop. Her lawyer objected. The judge waved him off. Karen stared at the table. Jaw clenched so hard I thought her teeth might break. Then the county inspector testified. Calm. Neutral. Deadly. Confirmed the guest house was illegally permitted. The patio had no permit. The pool was built on the wrong assumption of boundaries. A zoning officer, since resigned, had pushed things through without due diligence. Judge Lewin folded her hands, looked straight at Karen, and delivered a ruling so cold and precise it could have been cut from the granite outside. Karen knowingly built structures on my land. Karen knowingly ignored official surveys. Karen knowingly used falsified materials to pressure a neighbor. Therefore, her voice never rose. But every word was a hammer. Every structure encroaching on my property will be demolished. At her expense. Land restored to its original grade. All debris removed. 800,000 in damages. Legal fees. And penalties. The HOA. Placed under audit for a year. When the gavel fell, you could feel the shockwave. Someone whispered, "Holy hell." Karen didn't look at me. Just sat. Frozen. A statue carved from pure denial. Outside, reporters swarmed me. All I said was, I just wanted my land respected. That's all. Legal battle was over. But the consequences, they were just beginning. The weeks after the verdict rolled in like one of those Colorado snowstorms, slow at first, then suddenly heavy. Karen went quiet. But it wasn't the kind of quiet that comes from dignity or learning a lesson. It was the quiet you get when someone realizes the world just turned its back on them. And there's no one left to listen. The demolition order must have hit her like a freight train. The pool alone was going to cost over 100 grand to tear out. Patio, another 50. The guest house, plumbing, electrical, concrete fooder sit was a mess. None of it cheap. She couldn't sell the place. Not with an active demolition mandate hanging over it like a curse. Contractors quoted her numbers that'd make a rich man sweat in Karen. Well, she only played rich. Word around the ridge was she tried everything, negotiating, pleading, even calling in favors from folks nobody could quite identify. But once the law gets rolling, it don't stop just because your life is unraveling. The HOA didn't help her. Not anymore. They were too busy trying to survive their own audit, scrambling to distance themselves from the woman who dragged them all into this regulatory swamp. 30 days passed, 40, then 50. By day 63, Karen fell into default. The demolition invoices landed in her mailbox. She didn't open them. Late fees piled up. She stopped answering the phone. The county lien notice her HOA replacement found it, crumpled on a chair by her front door. Then the bank stepped in. Mortgage unpaid. Lien stacking up. Demolition costs looming. Damages owed to me. Permits frozen. Title tangled in legal disputes. No buyer in their right mind would touch that property. So, the bank did what banks do. They foreclosed. One cold morning, a notice went up on the HOA board, taped up next to a missing cat flyer foreclosure auction. Public sale. October 14th. Mesa County Courthouse. As is. Two little words that cover a world of ruin. When the auction day came, I drove into town early. Not out of spite. Just curiosity and maybe something I couldn't put my finger on. The courthouse parking lot was nearly empty. 3 pickup trucks. A sedan with out-of-state plates. A county car. Inside, the auction room was even emptier. Bank guy with a laptop, tapping a pen. 2 flannel shirt guys whispering. Probably flippers until they saw the demolition order stapled to the file and walked out. A woman in a scarf thumbed through the papers, muttered absolutely not, and vanished. By the time the clock hit 10, only 2 registered bidders were left me, and a local landscaping guy who'd buy a wrecked property just to strip it for materials. The bank rep cleared his throat. Read the legal description. Took him 3 full minutes. The HOA never made anything simple. Opening bid, $75. 000. The landscaper scratched his chin. Tear down with liens? Not worth it, he muttered, and didn't raise his hand. Silence. I lifted mine. The banker blinked, relieved to see at least someone interested. 75. Do I hear 80? Silence. 75 going once. I raised a finger. 76. The banker grinned. The landscaper hesitated, looked at me, looked at the file, then muttered, all yours, buddy, and left. Sold. 76,000. Congratulations, Mr. Edgington. I signed the paperwork calm as ever, but inside something shifted. Not triumph, not revenge, something steadier, like a final piece of a puzzle, or a load being set down after years of carrying it. This wasn't a victory lap. It was reclamation. Because, you see, that whole property, Karen's house, her pool, the guest house, every over-permitted, under legitimate structure was a nightmare for anybody else. Permits were a disaster. Demolition orders still stood. Boundaries were a mess. But to me, it was the only patch of land on earth I understood down to the last blade of grass. I didn't need to fear the paperwork. I was the paperwork. I didn't drive straight home. Instead, I went out to the ridge, pulled up in front of what used to be Karen's palace, and just stared. The place where she'd thrown her wine mixers, the patio she bragged about, the guest house she rented out. All of it empty now. Her fancy SUV was gone. Her potted plants were dead. Mailbox stuffed with papers she never opened. A house built on someone else's land always ends this way. Mine. Now. But I didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't even go inside. I just stood there, breathing it in, letting the moment settle deep. For the first time, I understood something about justice. It doesn't come quick. It sure doesn't come pretty. But when it comes all the way. And I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. I had plans for this place. Not for me. For the people who actually deserved a second chance. The day I took possession, the first thing I noticed wasn't the house site, was the silence. Not the uneasy quiet of conflict, but something cleaner, almost sacred. A kind of quiet that settles in when a storm finally passes and the air remembers what peace feels like. Demolition crews rolled in over the next 3 weeks. Jackhammers, backhoes, dump trucks. They tore out the pool, the patio, the guest house, peeled everything back until the ground looked raw and honest again. A scar healing in its own time. I didn't supervise much. Just walked the perimeter each morning with a thermos. Nodded to the crews. Watched the land go back to the shape it should have always had. Once the debris was gone, I called an old friend, Jack Trujillo. Jack had served with some of the toughest men I ever met. Smart. Steady. The quiet kind of strength. After the service, he founded a nonprofit that helped combat veterans readjust to civilian life. Not therapy. Not treatment. Just a place to decompress, breathe, and find their feet again. Years ago, over a beer, I'd floated an idea: what if there was a real place? Somewhere private, peaceful, didn't feel like a clinic? Jack loved it. But places like that don't just fall out of the sky. Now, I had one. Jack, I said, when he picked up, I think I'm ready to talk about that project again. He didn't pause long. You finally got the land? I did. And the house that comes with it? That too. A beat. Then, I'll bring the team. They showed up with a van full of tools, a truck of lumber, and that quiet, determined energy you see in folks who've carried too much for too long. Next few months, the ridge echoed with hammers, drills, saws, and most surprising of all, laughter. The kind of laughter men don't realize they miss. We tore out the tacky pergola, the gaudy fixtures, converted guest rooms to comfortable quarters, built soundproof, quiet rooms, blackout shades, a little library nook, a big kitchen where anybody could cook or just sit. Outside, we filled in the pool pit, reinforced it, and turned it into a rooftop garden and fire pit. At night, we'd sit under the stars, the ridge stretching away, the land breathing slow and deep. The first 5 veterans arrived on a Friday. A Marine who couldn't sleep more than 2 hours at a time. An Army medic who still set his phone for emergencies that would never come. A Navy gunner who hadn't stood in a quiet room in years without feeling trapped. 2 others who didn't say much at first. Just walked the property, shoulders dropping with every lap. They didn't need speeches. Didn't need rules. They just needed a place that felt steady. The moment they walked in, I felt the whole project click into place, the land being used for something good. One evening, maybe a week after the first group settled in, I stood out on the terrace as the sky turned gold. Jack came up, hands in his pockets, looking out across the ridge. He didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, he exhaled. You know, places like this don't just happen. They're made. He nodded at the house. Lights warm in the windows. And this one's going to save some lives. Didn't have much to say. Didn't need to. The truth just sort of settled in heavy. Gentle. Real. The sun dipped lower, painting everything amber. Down below, one of the vets was tending the fire, coaxing a flame to life. 2 others carried chairs out to join him. Another sat alone at the terrace edge, staring out at the horizon like he was finally letting himself believe in something again. Watching them, I realized something it took me more than 50 years to learn: peace isn't the absence of trouble. It's the presence of purpose. The ridge was quiet. Not empty quiet, but a full quiet. A quiet earned. Jack patted my shoulder. The way old friends do. You reclaimed a place that never had a soul, he said softly. Then you went and gave it one. I stood there long after he went inside, letting the breeze roll over me, listening to the sounds of life behind Malauder. Footsteps. The crackle of the fire. All of it built on land that was finally, rightfully, mine. But it was the purpose growing there that mattered now. The storm had passed. The noise had faded. What remained was the kind of peace a man can stand on firm. Steady. Real. And as the last light slipped behind the mountains, I felt it settle inside me. I'd fought for my land. But in the end, The land gave me something back, something worth every minute of the battle. Something worth every mile of quiet ahead. A few months later, the snow started to fall again, slow. Quiet. Honest. The veterans were still there, though the rotation had changed. Some came and went. Some stayed a little longer than planned. The place we built, the one that used to be a monument to arrogance, had turned into something different entirely. A sanctuary. A place where people could breathe again. I'd wake up before dawn most mornings, the same way I always had. Pour a cup of coffee, pull on a jacket, and step out onto that wraparound porch. The air up there has a taste: cold pine, dry wind, just a hint of wood smoke. I'd look out across the ridge, watch the light crawl down the valley, and think about how close I'd come to losing it all, not the land, but the peace that came with it. There's something strange about fighting for something so simple. When I first retired, I thought the world would leave me alone if I just stayed far enough away from it. Turns out, peace doesn't come from distance, it comes from protecting what matters. From standing up when the lines you drew start to mean something. Sometimes, in the evenings, the guys would gather around the fire pit out back. They'd tell stories, not the kind you read in books, the kind that live in the quiet spaces between words. Stories about convoy roads, about the smell of diesel and dust, about brothers who didn't make it home. I never said much, just sat there, listening, watching the sparks drift up into that enormous Colorado sky. One night, one of them, a young Marine, couldn't have been more than 28, looked over at me and said, "You ever miss it? The fight?" I thought about that for a while, took a slow sip of coffee, and said, "I don't miss the fight, but I do miss knowing exactly what I'm fighting for." He nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. But in that moment, we both knew something that doesn't get said out loud, that sometimes a man doesn't pick the battle. Sometimes the battle picks him. Over time, the place started to take on a rhythm of its own. Mornings were quiet. Afternoons were for projects: fixing fences, sanding wood, walking the ridge line. Evenings were for firelight and stories, and sometimes silence. Good silence. The kind that fills your lungs instead of your head. We planted wildflowers over the spot where the pool used to be. Poppies, lupin, a few mountain daisies. Come spring, they bloomed in thick waves, colors spilling over the dirt like forgiveness. The veterans started calling it the Ridge Garden. I never renamed the property, but in the county paperwork, it's listed now as Blue Haven Ridge Veteran Restorative Grounds. Funny, huh? The same name she tried to weaponize against me, now it belongs to something that actually means something. Sometimes I'll get letters from families' sons, daughters, wives. They talk about how their husband, their dad, their brother came back different. How they never thought they'd see him smile again until he came up here. They thank me, like I did something grand. But the truth is, the land did the healing. I just made sure nobody else messed with it. Every once in a while, I'll drive into town, grab supplies, maybe stop at the diner. Folks still talk about the HOA lady every now and then, how she tried to steal a hillside and ended up losing everything. I don't add to the gossip. I just nod, pay my tab, and drive back up the mountain. Karen? She moved away. Last I heard. Some say California. Some say Florida. Doesn't matter. Wherever she went, I hope she found something real, or at least learned what happens when you build your life on someone else's ground. As for me, I'm right where I belong. The porch boards creak the same way they did when I built them. The coffee still tastes better outside. The wind still sounds like it's carrying old stories down from the peaks. And sometimes, when the morning light hits just right, I can almost see the lines, not the kind on paper, not the ones carved into deeds or boundaries, but the ones that separate who we were from who we've become. You know, a man spends half his life chasing peace, and the other half realizing it was never something to chase in the first place. It's something you build, nail by nail, truth by truth, fight by fight, until one day, you wake up and realize it's been under your feet the whole time. So that's my story. The one about the land, the lines, and the lesson. About a man who thought he was done fighting and a woman who thought she could rewrite the map. And in the end, the land outlasted both of us. It always does. When the sun sets over the ridge and the sky goes gold. I sit there with my coffee and my old dog by my feet, and I can't help but smile just a little. Not because I won, but because the land did. Because truth did. Because somewhere out there, under all that Colorado sky, a few good men are finding their peace on the same ground where arrogance once tried to plant roots. And that's enough for me.